A grizzly bear cub, barely a few months old, was thrown off a bridge like trash, helpless, broken, and alone. The water was ice cold, the current merciless. Everyone thought it was over. But one man, working quietly under that same bridge, saw something that changed his life forever. What he did next wasn't just brave, it was unthinkable. This is not just a story of rescue. It's a story of redemption, of a bond between human and animal forged in trauma and trust. And by the end, you'll see why people around the world still can't talk about this without crying. Before we begin, make sure to subscribe to the channel, like this video, and turn on notifications so we can keep bringing you stories that restore your faith in compassion and courage. It was just past 7:30 a.m. when Jesse Morrow heard the sound. He'd been working the river cleanup job for 5 years, trash, mostly, tires, car batteries, old fishing gear. Nothing surprised him anymore until that sound. A splash, sharp, sudden, wrong. Not the kind made by a log or fish. No, this was heavier. Desperate. Jesse dropped the rope he was hauling and turned toward the bend in the river where the water ran fastest under the eastbound overpass. Then he heard it again. Not a splash this time, a cry. High-pitched. In pain or terror? Or both? He didn't think. He just moved. Wading waist-deep into the freezing water, he fought the current with heavy boots and a faster heartbeat. The morning fog clung to the surface, thick and cold. But he saw it, a ball of sodden brown fur spinning in the current, bumping against a cluster of rocks. Jesse lunged, gripped, and pulled. It wasn't until the fur stopped thrashing and the eyes, wide, golden, terrified, met his that he realized it was a bear cub. And it was alive. Barely. Jesse hauled the cub up onto the gravel bank with both arms, cradling it like a child. It coughed violently, water pouring from its nose. Blood ran from its left ear. Its back leg was twisted wrong. There were bruises around its belly, like it had been gripped, thrown. He looked up to the bridge. And he knew someone did this. His phone was soaked. No signal. He carried the cub, shivering, unconscious, to his work truck, laid it gently on an old thermal blanket in the back seat, and turned the heat up full blast. The local wildlife center was 36 minutes away. He made it in 24. The vet on duty that morning, Dr. Harper, was in disbelief. "Where did you find him?" she asked. "Under the bridge," Jesse replied. His voice, somebody dropped him. She didn't ask how he was sure. She could see it in his eyes. The cub's heartbeat was faint, but it was still there. They named him River. That night, Jesse couldn't sleep. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw those claws reaching toward him, not to harm, but to hold on. That little creature had fought so hard to live. And now it wasn't just a wild animal. It was his reason to come back the next day. And the next. The veterinary clinic was quiet that morning, not the sterile kind of quiet Jesse had expected, but a soft, living silence, like even the walls were holding their breath for the little bear's sake. River lay on a padded mat in the recovery room, hooked to and fore, a bandage wrapped tightly around his hind leg. One eye was swollen shut. The other blinked, slowly open just enough to track Jesse as he entered. Dr. Harper stood nearby, clipboard in hand. Her voice was low. "Careful. He's stable, but barely. He has bruised ribs, possible internal swelling, and that back leg is fractured in 2 places." Jesse crouched beside the cub. River's fur, once dark and slick with river water, had been dried and brushed. He looked smaller now. More fragile. Can he walk? Jesse asked. Maybe with time. But that's assuming he makes it through the next few days. There it was. The truth. Not cruel, just clinical. But Jesse wasn't thinking like a scientist. He was thinking like someone who'd seen life flicker in a pair of golden eyes and refused to let it go out. That night, Jesse returned with a sleeping bag and an old guitar. He wasn't a musician. But River didn't seem to mind. He sat on the floor, back against the wall, playing slow, broken chords under flickering fluorescent lights. The cub didn't move. Just breathed. But when Jesse paused mid-song and spoke, "You're not alone anymore. You hear me?" River's paw twitched. It wasn't much. But it was enough. By the third day, River lifted his head. By the fifth, he tried to sit up. By the seventh, he whimpered when Jesse left the room. The staff noticed. So did Dr. Harper. "He responds to your voice more than mine," she said. "It's not normal. Wild bears don't bond like this." Jesse looked at River, now curled up beside a heated blanket. "Yeah," he said. "But nothing about this has been normal." It was early spring when Jesse asked to take River home. Not forever. Just to foster, until he healed enough to be transferred to the bear sanctuary up north. It took weeks of paperwork, inspections, and state approval. But eventually, Jesse stood outside the clinic with River in a secured carrier in the truck bed. The bear didn't make a sound. He didn't need to. They were going home. Together. Back at Jesse's cabin near the riverbank, he set up a protected enclosure under the trees, with a heat lamp, a den of straw, and plenty of space for River to move when he was ready. That first night, Jesse sat nearby with a flashlight and a thermos of coffee. He watched as River dragged himself to the edge of the shelter, sniffed the air, and let out a deep, soft breath. Not fear. Not pain. Relief. The mornings by the river were cold, even in spring. Mist rose like breath from the water, curling between the pine trees and across Jesse's modest property. It was quiet. Peaceful. And for the first time in a long time, Jesse had a reason to wake up early that didn't feel like work. River was waiting. Every day, the cub grew just a little more, just enough to notice. The first time he stood on all fours, Jesse missed it by seconds. He'd gone inside for coffee, only to return and find River wobbling, legs trembling like reeds in wind, holding himself upright. "You're kidding me," Jesse whispered, watching from behind the enclosure fence. River turned his head slowly, as if to say, "You saw that, right?" Then he toppled sideways into the straw, letting out a small grunt. Jesse laughed, and for the first time since the rescue, so did River. Not a human laugh, no, but a chuffing sound that shook the fur on his chest, light and playful. The sound of a life choosing to begin again. River still couldn't walk far. His leg, though healing, remained stiff, and the muscles in his side were weak. Jesse built a ramp down to the water's edge, padded and safe. Every afternoon, they'd make the journey together, Jesse walking ahead, River behind, sometimes crawling, sometimes leaning into Jesse's side. There was no leash, no command, only presence. And that was enough. By the fourth week, River was moving freely around the fenced perimeter. He sniffed the air, climbed halfway onto a tree stump, even tried pawing at a trout in the river's shallows. He was still slow, still limping, but the wildness in his eyes had returned, not the fear kind, the fire kind. One afternoon, Jesse brought out a rubber ball, not for training, just to see. He tossed it gently into the straw. River watched, tilted his head, then pounced. He missed by a mile. But the second time, he caught it and held it between his teeth with a rumbling sound deep in his throat, a mix of pride and excitement. Jesse crouched beside him, shaking his head. "You're not a dog, buddy." River dropped the ball in front of Jesse and nudged it back toward him. The game had begun. At night, Jesse would sometimes sit by the fire pit, watching stars blink through the trees. River would curl nearby, paws tucked beneath his chest, head resting on a log like a pillow. He still winced in his sleep sometimes. Jesse could tell, muscle memories of cold water, pain, falling. But every time, Jesse would speak softly. And every time, River would calm. "You're here," Jesse would say. "You made it. You're okay now." And River would breathe deep, steady, like maybe he believed it now, too. Healing isn't always obvious. Sometimes it's measured in inches. It was a Sunday morning when Jesse saw him. The sun had barely crested the hills, casting pale gold across the riverbank, when a shadow moved near the far edge of the fence. At first, Jesse thought it was just a deer. But the figure didn't move like one. It stood still, watching, a man, tall, lean, wearing camo from head to toe, binoculars in one hand and something heavier slung over his shoulder, a rifle. Jesse froze. He didn't yell. Didn't move. Just reached for the scope he kept on the porch. When he peered through it, the man was already turning, and then he disappeared into the tree line. Later that day, Jesse found bootprints in the mud, deep ones, fresh. He followed them for 20 yards before they vanished in the underbrush. His heart beat hard in his throat the whole time, not because he was afraid of people, but because he knew what people could do to things they didn't understand. And a half-domesticated grizzly bear cub on private land, that would raise questions. Or worse, spark threats. That night, Jesse reinforced the perimeter. He added extra wire, motion lights, and a hidden trail cam. River paced nervously as the hammer pounded nails. The cub didn't understand the danger, but he could feel Jesse's change in rhythm. No music that night. No games. Just silence and tension. 2 days later, the footage arrived. Jesse plugged the trail cam into his laptop. There, frozen on the screen at 2:14 a.m., was the man again. Closer this time. Looking directly at the enclosure. No binoculars now. Just the rifle. Jesse's jaw clenched. Who was he? Poacher? Trespasser? Wildlife official? He didn't know. But whoever he was, he knew about River. And that meant they had a problem. Jesse called Dr. Harper the next morning. "I think someone's been watching us." "You need to move the bear," she said immediately. "We can arrange transport to the sanctuary. It's sooner than planned, but it might be safer." Jesse looked outside. River was curled in a patch of sun, licking honey off a flat rock, completely unaware. "He's not ready," Jesse whispered. "You don't have a choice," Harper replied. "If Fish and Game find out, they'll take him. You won't get a say in how." Jesse nodded slowly. "Then we'll get ready." That night, Jesse sat by the fire again. River was beside him, but the mood was different now. He reached over, resting his hand gently on the bear's shoulder. The cub didn't flinch, didn't pull away, just leaned in. "You've got a whole life ahead of you," Jesse murmured. "But it's not here." The morning was colder than usual. Frost clung to the wild grass like a warning. Jesse stood outside the cabin with a steaming mug in his hand, eyes locked on the distant trees. River was inside the enclosure, still curled in his den. But Jesse wasn't looking at the bear. He was waiting for the truck, for the man, for whatever was coming. He didn't have to wait long. At 8:07 a.m., the sound of tires on gravel broke the silence. A white pickup slowed at the edge of his property. No plates, just dust and shadow. And when it stopped, the door opened, and the man stepped out. Same camo. Same cold stare. This time, no binoculars, just the rifle, slung loose over his shoulder. Jesse didn't reach for a weapon. He stepped forward, steady, hands at his sides. "Can I help you?" he asked, voice calm but iron underneath. The man's lips barely moved. "You're keeping a bear." Jesse's heart pounded. "He's a rescue." "Injured?" "Temporary." "Illegal," the man said flatly. Jesse didn't blink. "Who are you?" "Someone who's seen what bears like that do to people." "This one's just a cub." The man's eyes narrowed. "They grow." Jesse knew he had minutes before this turned into something irreversible. So he stepped closer. He was thrown off a bridge. Someone tried to kill him. "I didn't bring a predator into the wild, I pulled him out of death." The man stayed silent. Then his fingers brushed the stock of the rifle. "Doesn't matter how they start. Bears kill." Jesse stepped between him and the enclosure. "So do people." The silence between them cracked like ice. And then, without warning, River let out a sound. Not a growl. A whimper, soft. "Afraid." The man turned his head slightly and saw him. The cub, still half limping, standing behind the wire fence, not baring teeth, not charging, just watching. Like a child behind glass. For a moment, something shifted. The man looked away. Jesse held his ground. "You've seen bears kill," Jesse said. "Fine. But have you ever seen one choose not to?" The man didn't answer. Instead, he turned back toward the truck. "You've got a week. After that, I report this. And they'll come with tranquilizers." Jesse nodded once. "Understood." The truck disappeared into the trees. But the weight of it all stayed behind. Jesse didn't sleep. He sat with River, stroking the thick fur behind his ear. The cub had barely moved since the man left. Maybe he didn't understand words. The air was too still. Jesse stood on the porch, one hand resting on the wooden rail, the other gripping the old flashlight that had become part of his nightly routine. River was asleep, or at least pretending to be, in the shelter. The cub had grown, but he still limped, and more than that, he still leaned into Jesse's voice like it was the only thing holding him together. Tomorrow, the transport team from the sanctuary would arrive. But tonight felt wrong. The wind had died hours earlier. No frogs, no owls. Even the river moved quieter than usual. Jesse's instincts, shaped by years on the water and in the woods, screamed at him. He moved through the dark like smoke, checking every lock, every camera, every inch of fence. It wasn't fear, exactly. It was something older, a knowing. At 2:11 a.m., the motion light snapped on at the back fence. He rushed to the monitor. One figure, then two. Not the man from before. These were younger, teenagers, maybe, flashlights in hand, laughing. But one of them held a rifle. Jesse's stomach dropped. They didn't know the cameras were infrared. Didn't know Jesse had dialed the sheriff's office before even stepping off the porch. He didn't wait. He grabbed the flare gun, loaded it, and moved like a ghost through the trees. The boys reached the enclosure first. River stirred inside, let out a confused growl. One boy flinched. The other raised the rifle. "Don't," the first one whispered. "You said we were just going to scare it." "It's just a bear, man." Jesse's voice cut through the night like thunder. "Put the gun down." They spun, startled. The flashlight caught Jesse's silhouette and the flare gun raised above his head. "This isn't a game," Jesse shouted. "That bear is under wildlife protection. You shoot him, you go to prison. You understand me?" The boy hesitated, then dropped the rifle. The other ran. Red and blue lights flickered through the trees moments later as the sheriff's truck arrived. Jesse stood between the cub and the trespassers, heart pounding, lungs burning. River's nose pressed gently to the fence, not in fear, in recognition. After the officers left, boys in the back seat, scared speechless, Jesse returned to River. He opened the gate and sat beside the cub, who leaned in and rested his head in Jesse's lap. Neither of them moved. The fire had gone out hours ago, but the warmth between them remained. As dawn approached, Jesse whispered, "Tomorrow's the day, River. You'll be free." The cub didn't respond, but his breathing slowed, and for the first time in weeks, Jesse believed he could actually let go. Not because River needed him less, but because River was ready. The moment you realize they no longer need saving. The truck arrived just after 9 a.m., a long silver trailer, polished clean, marked with the sanctuary's logo, a pine tree curled into the shape of a paw. Jesse stood outside the enclosure with River at his side. He'd slept there, half out of caution, half out of unwillingness to waste a single moment. The handlers stepped out quietly. No tranquilizers, no cages, just calm voices, open arms, and soft eyes. River watched them from behind Jesse's leg. Not afraid. Just unsure. The cub had learned to trust one human, but this was something else entirely, letting go. The lead handler, a woman named Dana, crouched low and extended her hand. She didn't speak at first, just waited. River didn't move. Then Jesse knelt beside him, placing his hand on River's shoulder. "It's okay," he whispered. "She's here to help, like I was." The cub looked between them and then, slowly, carefully, took one step forward, then another, until his nose brushed Dana's fingers. She smiled. "He's brave," she said softly. Jesse nodded, not trusting his voice. They guided River gently into the trailer. There were no chains, no fear, just space blankets, a corner full of straw, a river stone Jesse had given them. One from the bank where River had taken his first real breath again. As the doors shut, River turned back one last time. Their eyes met, and Jesse finally let the tears come. "You made it, little guy. You made it." The truck rumbled to life and disappeared down the dirt road. Jesse stood there long after the dust settled, not empty, not broken, just changed. Forever. Weeks passed. Then a letter arrived from the sanctuary. A photo tucked inside, River, now nearly twice the size, playing in a shallow stream with two other cubs. Healthy. Wild. Free. Dana had written, "He still runs to the fence when he hears a guitar. We keep one nearby, just in case." Jesse smiled. And that night, for the first time in a long time, he played again. Alone on the porch, but not lonely. Because he knew some stories don't end with goodbye. They end with beginning again. If this story moved you, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, leave a like, and share it with someone who still believes in second chances, because sometimes, the smallest acts of kindness can change not just a life, but a world.